What's up, y'all? It's Phil, and it's time for a quick springtime project. So in light of a lot of my DIYs being very long and some of them being super in-depth, this one is also going to be in-depth, but it's going to be short because it's a small, quick, and easy project. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's talk materials. First off, you're going to need a pressure-treated 4x4, preferably at 8 foot long. It's going to give you a little bit of scrap, but I bought a 12-footer because I'm going to be building 3 of these, and that's going to give me exactly the amount of material that I need. They also may not come in 8 foot, so you might have a little extra, but that's alright. You're also going to need a 2x4. One single pressure-treated 2x4. You're going to have a lot of leftover. Last but not least, you need 3 1x6s per planter box. Now the ones that I found are not actual regular 1x6s. They're actually slightly thicker, and they are rounded on both sides. I don't know what they're called. I don't know what's special about them. I'm sorry, I wish I did. They just happen to be in the big box store on this one side where you can get like regular 1x6s that are thin, they're like 3/4, they're real wavy and crappy because they're all pressure treated garbage wood, but these are less garbagey pressure treated wood and they have a nice rounded edge, which is going to be nice because that's a lot less work that I have to do on the end when I'm trying to plane out and smooth those tops. I don't have to do that, it's already done for me. And then also where the boards meet is going to be a nice little seam where it rounds in and then rounds back out, so I think that's going to be a pretty cool feature. If you can find these, take a look at what I'm using in the video, try and find something similar, but go to your big box store and look these up. They're like rounded edge, simple pressure treated 1x6s. I would get those in 8 foot lengths, and that's all you're going to need. Now let's talk tools. You need a chop saw. You need a table saw. You need a square. You need a pencil. You need a tape measure. And last but not least, you need a drill and driver. Also, I didn't mention it in materials, but you are going to need some coated screws. Now, I got some Deckmate T25 Star Bit Drive 2-inch coated screws. These are absolutely necessary because this is pressure treated wood, which means the copper and stuff inside of that is going to absolutely rust anything, including the traditional drywall screws that I'm always using on my projects. You can't use those here. You have to have a treated, coated screw. And I really love the Star Drive bit because then you don't really necessarily have to pre-drill every single one. You can actually just drive these in, and some of these are even like self-tapping, which is cool. In fact, I think the ones I bought are. So that's just one less step you have to do. Now let's talk cuts. So on the chop saw, I'm going to take my 1x6s and I'm going to cut them into some smaller sections. Now, the easiest way to do this is to think 4 foot by 2 foot, because that's pretty basic math. So you can always modify these plans later on if you want to do a different size, but for me, I'm going to go with a very simple 2 foot by 4 foot design, and that's going to make everything just fit perfectly. Obviously, my final dimensions are going to be bigger than that, but it makes my cuts super simple. So for starters, I'm going to take 2 of the 1x6s, and I'm going to make them up on the chop saw. I'm going to chop one in straight, so that's going to lose about 1/4 inch or so. I'm then going to cut in just shy of 48 inches, so like 47 7/8 inches. Go ahead and cut, flip everything over, go to the other end, measure another 48 7/8 inches, go ahead and cut there, and then I've got just shy of 48 inches for all 4 of those boards. Then I'm going to go and do the exact same process on the other 1x6. This time I'm just going to cut it down to just shy of 2 feet, which is 24 inches. So again, I'm going to square that first end just by taking off the end of it. Then I'm going to measure in exactly 23 7/8 inches. I'm going to go ahead and make 4 cuts at that same width using the first board as a template, and that should give me exactly what I need for the 2 smaller sides. Last thing on the chop saw is going to be the 4x4 and the 2x4s. So I'm going to cut the 4x4 into 12-inch sections. So again, I'm going to chop the end off so I get rid of that nasty edge and have a nice square top on it. Then I'm going to go and cut it into 12-inch sections. Now, that's actually going to give me a little bit of a foot that I'm going to end up kind of burying a little bit later to keep the whole thing in place, but it's not going to go down too deep, and it's also not going to stick up past the top. It's going to give it a little bit to kind of grip into the ground as it settles in over the years. So I'm going to cut 4 of those out of the 4x4 and 2 of those out of the 2x4 for each of the planters. Now for me, that means I'm going to be cutting 6 of the 2x4s and 12? Yeah, exactly 12. That's why I bought a 12-foot. Duh, Phil. But again, if you want to make this taller, you can always add increments of 5.5 inches for your 1x6s, and you can make it as tall or as short as you want it to be. Just modify the dimensions as you see fit for your project. Then we're going to get a little more complicated over on the table saw, but before we do, I want to tell you guys something. Definitely make sure that you are wearing work gloves or latex gloves and a respirator or a mask of some kind when working with pressure treated wood. It is extremely toxic to breathe in, and it's actually toxic on your skin as well. It's more of a prolonged contact, especially when it's like fresh and wet. And trust me, if you're picking it up from one of the home stores, it's probably going to be fresh and wet. So you need to get it, work with it as quick as you can, but don't let that stuff get into your skin and get into your, eyes and hands and fingernails and all kinds of stuff. And definitely don't breathe it in when you're cutting it. And never, ever, ever burn your scraps. All of this stuff is toxic. It's extremely dangerous to work with, so make sure to use your normal safety precautions. That means don't do what I do, because I'm probably going to do it wrong. So don't judge me. Finally, to finish this thing up, we're going to go over to the table saw. And on the table saw, I have to actually disengage my saw stop feature, but on this thing, we are going to set the depth of the cut at exactly 1.5 inches, so that from the fence to the outside kerf of the blade is 1.5 inches. We're also going to set the blade so the very top of the kerf is exactly 1.5 inches deep. This can also be done with a dado stack, but since I'm doing a perfectly square cut, and you guys may not have a dado stack and they're very expensive to just run out and get for a project like this, may not be worth doing. But using this technique, you can cut these really great lap joints, and I'll show you how to do that. So once you've got that fence set, what you're going to do is run all of those 4x4s straight through, making the same cut on every single board, and try to keep them oriented so that you know exactly which way you're going. If you're just building one of these, cutting 4 is not that hard. I'm going to be cutting 12, and some people may be cutting more, so you just want to be careful and make sure that you know what side you're supposed to be cutting. Once you make that initial cut, you're going to turn all of the boards around and flip them up so that your next cut meets at the top of where the previous cut was, but you want the previous cut to be lined up so it's butted up against your fence. As you cut these through, watch out, because it's going to spit that wood back at you from underneath. So I usually like to step off to the side, but it usually doesn't come out too fast. You just have to understand that it's going to come out, and it's probably going to hit you if you're not careful. Once you've got all of those cut, you're pretty much ready to start assembling. One thing you can do to make it look a little bit nicer, which I'm going to go ahead and do, I do have a compound miter saw, so I'm going to set my saw at 45 degrees and set up a stop block so that I can go ahead and cut 3 of those corners that are left on that 4x4 into an angle. And that's just going to soften that edge so that my daughter and my wife don't run into it and bang up their shins and stuff like that. It also gives it a little bit nicer of an edge that goes with that rounded edge. So you have a nice rounded edge on top of your 1x6s down the long side, and then you have these slanted edges on your 4x4s. For those 2x4s, you can go ahead and cut that edge off. I'm probably going to as well, just again so that you have a nice kind of point coming up instead of that hard, sharp edge, and it just gives it that little extra touch. Once all your cuts are done, we're ready for assembly. Now all that's left is assembly, and that's pretty easy to do. For starters, we want to take each of our 1x6s and we want to measure from one end to the other and find the middle point. Since we're just shy of 48 inches, that really should be just shy of 24 inches. So go ahead and mark at like 27 15/16. Measure again from the other side and mark right there as well, and you should have pretty close to the center point. It doesn't have to be perfect for a project like this, it's just nice to know where it is. Once you've done that on all 4 of your 48-inch boards, you are ready to go. So for starters, we're going to build these upside down, and I'm going to set everything on my assembly table so the 4 legs are sticking up. That means I want that fancy mitered edge facing downward, and I'm going to put the boards into each of these joints. Glue isn't really effective with a project like this because it is going to be outdoors and it's pressure treated wood, so with those coated screws, I'm really relying on those to hold everything together. So for starters, we want to assemble one of the long edges. So I'm going to take 2 of my 48-inch boards, and I'm going to start with the bottom, or I guess the top one in this case, and set it on the table, line it up with the 2 4x4s, and fit it into that joint, that lap that we cut. And I'm going to add 2 screws in each end to each of the 4x4s, checking for square as I go. Then I'm going to go ahead and add the second board right on top of it, just kind of butting the two flat edges against each other where that rounded side is. Finally, I'm going to go back to that center point, and I'm going to find the center point of my 2x4 piece and put that directly over those lines so everything lines up. And then adding 4 screws from underneath, I'm going to attach the 1x6s to the 2x4. And now I've got one side done. Simply repeat that process for the other side and your 2 long sides are done. Now it's time to move on to the short sides, and that's even easier to put on because everything's pretty much already put together. So you're going to take one of the 1x6s, and with the piece still upside down on your table, you want to attach one of the 1x6s, butt the end of the board directly against the side of the other 1x6 inside that lap joint. And then going at a slight angle, not too steep because then it'll pull right out of the end of the wood, but you want to go not straight in because then you might actually miss the 1x4 altogether. Going at a very slight, maybe 5-degree angle, drill straight into that thing and just get it in there, add 2 screws, and now it's attached. Repeat this on the other side and make sure to check for square while you're doing this. Once everything is square and that first board is secured, go ahead and add the second board just like you did on the long sections. Flip over to the other side and repeat this process once again. Once everything is in place, carefully flip this bad boy over and you've got yourself a planter box. Now it's time to actually install them, which is pretty easy. Take a shovel, pick your spot. You want to dig down a little bit of a hole. Obviously, we're not going any deeper than like an inch, but just enough that that foot can drop in and set the bottom of the 2x6 flat on the ground. You may need to kind of level out the ground in some places, and I've actually had to go through before and dig the whole thing out to get it flat, then dig the footholes and drop everything in. Once the footholes are in, pack them back a little bit so that you've got some dirt holding everything in place, and they're set up and ready to go. Now you can put in a weed barrier or some plastic or some newspaper, whatever your choice is, put in some dirt, put in some compost, put some topsoil, and throw some plants in. And you've got yourself a planter, or 3 in my case. That's it, y'all. It's super easy and it's super fun. This is a great project to do with kids. This is a great project to do as a family, and this is a really, really awesome beginner's woodworking project. It's going to teach you some of the basics that you'll need to know on a miter saw, and also a really cool trick on the table saw that I wish I'd learned a lot earlier because it's actually pretty rewarding to do those laps on the table saw. Also, you get to practice some safety, which I catch a lot of flack here on YouTube for not practicing proper safety techniques. I am a professional. I do this all the time. I do a lot of things that the normal DIY person shouldn't be doing, or someone who doesn't understand the machinery probably shouldn't, and that makes me forget to use proper safety procedures. So please don't be like me and actually do all the safety stuff you're supposed to do. But with that, y'all, I am out of here. I've got some Animal Crossing to go play. I've got some things to do. Should probably spend some time with the kids. Definitely find me on social media. I am at PMK Woodworking on Instagram, Facebook, and even Twitter if you want to find me on there. Show me some of your projects. If you do this project, and if you do any variations on it, I absolutely want to see it. Please understand that with pressure-treated wood, you cannot stain it. It will not take the stain very well because it's so inundated with that copper material that it's just not going to take stain, or at least take stain well. You can use like a decking stain. I've had really good success with that before, especially the one coat. I think like Olympian or one of those companies, not sponsored, makes it. It works really well. It stains and it coats and it seals in one coat. They have some really great colors. I actually did a playhouse using some of that last year, and it worked really freaking well. So if you do want to stain them, I definitely recommend getting something like that because it UV protects it. It works even with pressure treated wood, and it's going to seal it all in one coat, so you don't have to go back and do it 4 and 5 times and deal with the weather and all that kind of stuff. Same goes for paint. Paint is really hard to get to stick to pressure treated wood, and exterior paint is the only thing that's going to hold up to the elements. So let me know if you guys do this project. Let me see them so that I can brag about you on my Instagram and show off your projects. And in the meantime, guys, enjoy your spring. I know we have got some crazy times here in 2020, and it's a little bit ridiculous, but spring is sprung, summer's on its way, so hey, the best thing we can do is be outside as long as we're social distancing and all that jazz. So thanks for watching, y'all. We'll catch you next time.